we go now, baby. My first official video for covers. Welcome to a little show that we're going to be calling Pound for Pound Picks, the first ever show. We got a very worthy event, a big night of fights in Las Vegas on Saturday night, UFC 290. UFC always bringing it for International Fight Week. So what is this show? Well, basically, we're going to be coming at you pretty much every week that there's a UFC event, covering our best bets for that event, also looking at the latest news in the sport from a betting perspective. And joining me, it's just not going to be me, it's going to be my guy, Ro, my new coworker here at Covers, Joe and Ro, both UFC betting guys. So hopefully we'll be able to make you guys some money. Okay, Ro, that is enough small talk. Let's get right into the action here for UFC 290. And we're going to start at the top. The 145-pound title is on the line. Alexander Volkanovski coming in as a pretty big favorite, right around minus 400 at some sports books versus Yair Rodriguez. And yes, I like Volkanovski to win, but we got to get a better number than minus 400. I'm going to take Volk to win by decision. You can get that at plus money, plus 110, an absolutely beautiful number. So why do I like him to win? Well, I think he's a much more efficient striker. Dig into the stats here a little bit. He's got a much better striking differential, coming in at almost plus 3 significant strikes per minute. Rodriguez, not bad, but not even close to that, coming in at plus 0.75. Volkanovski also much more accurate. And you got to consider he's done all that versus much better competition as well. Now, why do I like him to win by decision? Well, this has been a serious pattern that we've seen throughout Volkanovski's career. 9 of his 13 fights have gone to the scorecards, including 5 of his last 6, which were all 5-round fights. And as we know, Rodriguez, this is a very hard guy to put away. He's only been finished once in his UFC career, and that was due to a doctor's stoppage versus Frankie Edgar 6 years ago. Now, Ro, you like Volkanovski here as well, and we're somewhat aligned. So how are you going to be betting on this one?
I like Volkanovski for a lot of the same reasons. He's just so efficient, such a good striker moving in and out of range. One thing that I am a little bit cautious about is because Yair is so good with those head kicks. We've seen Volkanovski at times kind of lead into those. So he's going to be eating some shots in this fight. But he's so good in terms of his overall striking defense. He's also got that wrestling in his back pocket. So I do think he's able to get the win here. But I also could see him getting a late stoppage here as well. I could see him kind of wearing him down over the course of the fight, picking up maybe a TKO win, in the 4th or 5th round. I could see him, getting a grounded pound win as well, because I do think Yair can be a little bit vulnerable on the mat. It does depend on what your book has available. I do like Volk to win by decision, but FanDuel also has Volkanovski to win in the 4th, 5th round or by decision. And you can get that at about minus 150. And I'm definitely willing to lay the juice on a play like that.
All right, there you have it. Now let's drop down one fight. The co-main event, the 125-pound title is on the line. The champion, Brandon Moreno, defending against Alexander Pantoja. Moreno, the favorite here. Ro, how are you going to be betting on this one?
Yeah, Moreno's sitting right now at about minus 190. Pantoja coming back at about plus 160. This is an interesting one. Me and Joe were talking about this a few days ago. We both kind of like this fight to go the distance. Both of these guys have never been finished in their career. It was at plus 128 yesterday, but now it's down to about minus 120 to minus 125. So we're looking elsewhere for a little bit of value here. And I just like Pantoja to win this one outright. This is a really interesting division. You see it flyweight. You look at a guy like Moreno. He had 4 fights against Davison Figueiredo, a couple of fights against Kai Kara France. These guys have fought twice too before. Once technically an exhibition fight at Tough, I think way back in 2016. Also fought once in the UFC in 2018. Pantoja won that one as well. Looking at the overall body of work they both have had since then, I don't want to put too much stock in a fight going back to 2018. But one takeaway I do have from those fights is that these guys are pretty much on the same level. There's not a whole lot separating them. They're both in that upper tier at flyweight. And so, it's really tough for me to, look at the juice on someone like Moreno at 2-1 and consider him in a fight against Pantoja when both these guys, don't have a whole lot separating them. The biggest advantage that Moreno has in this one is that he is more experienced in 5-round fights. He's gone the distance before. We've seen him, fight with a lot of resilience against guys like Figueiredo. But at the same time, I think Pantoja's got a little bit more power on his feet. He's a little bit slicker in terms of his transitions on the mat as well. So I think he poses a really good threat in terms of his overall ability to stay with Moreno throughout this fight. So I think this fight should be, probably closer to a pick'em. Maybe Moreno at minus 150, but with Moreno at minus 200, Pantoja coming back at about plus 160, I think the value is definitely with the challenger here.
Yeah, we're aligned once again here. I think that this fight is much closer than these odds indicate. And I think quite simply Pantoja might have his number. Maybe there's some recency bias here with Moreno because he is the guy with the championship belt around his waist. And I think Pantoja might have his number. He beat him on the Ultimate Fighter. Now people might say, hey, it's an exhibition, it doesn't count. But yeah, the stakes are pretty high for those fights, right? Guys looking to build their careers. And he also has a convincing decision victory against him in 2018. People might say, hey, Moreno's better than he was then. That's true. You can say the exact same thing about Pantoja. So here's how I'm going to bet this one. I can't do my first covers video without taking some sort of big swing. So I'm going to take a big swing. I absolutely love the value. Pantoja by decision. It's going off at plus 420 over at FanDuel right now. I think that is an absolutely beautiful bet. So Pantoja to win across 25 minutes plus 420 over at FanDuel right now. Okay, once again, let's drop down one fight, another marquee fight in the middleweight division. It is Robert Whittaker versus Dricus du Plessis, number one contender fight going down here. So how am I going to bet this one? Once again, we have a beautiful number, more plus money here. Robert Whittaker going off at plus 190 to win by decision. Keep in mind, this is just a 3-round fight, and this is what Robert Whittaker does. He wins by decision. We've seen 9 of his last 12 fights go to the scorecards, including 5 separate 5-rounders. This is just a 3-round fight. For du Plessis, this is a massive step up in competition. His biggest wins in his career came against a completely shot Darren Till and Derek Brunson, who's inching closer and closer to retirement. I think Whittaker is the best fighter in the UFC that does not have a belt around his waist right now. Over his last 15 fights, he's only been defeated by one man, Israel Adesanya. Ro, once again, we are in alignment. Why do you like Whittaker to win by decision here?
Well, first of all, I'm just gonna point out for the viewers out there that we're not always going to be in alignment on these things. It just sort of worked out that this week, with the the picks that we have and the main fights on this card, that we are definitely in lockstep with a few of these. But moving forward, there's definitely going to be some disagreements here and some different kind of leans that we're looking at. But yeah, I mean, I love Whittaker to win by decision here. It's kind of interesting too. Like you pointed out, those odds, you're going to get about plus 190. So the shortest odds on the board are actually Whittaker to win by knockout, which is about plus 130. He hasn't knocked out someone since 2017. When he knocked out Jacare Souza. So, I mean, that's a pretty big, long time away from, winning by way of knockout. He's been a decision machine lately. I could kind of see why people expect him to win by knockout, especially the books. And that says more about du Plessis than I think Whittaker. Du Plessis tends to be very aggressive. His striking defense can be, a bit sloppy at times. The big thing about du Plessis that I would say is probably, he's not as technical as Whittaker, but his cardio has also been questionable. And with a lot of fighters, when they have poor cardio, you kind of see their output wane as the fight goes on. For du Plessis, it's like when he gets gassed, he still seems to blitz and use his offense, but his defense just gets sloppier and sloppier. So I think some people think that, Whittaker might be able to finish him. I don't think so. I think Whittaker is just, kind of going to rely on that technical aspect of his ability. We saw that against Cannonier too. He dropped Cannonier, but he didn't go in for the finish. I think he's going to be a little bit more cautious like that. Just look to outpoint du Plessis. And like you said, the 3 rounds definitely makes it more worthwhile as well, because if this was a 5-rounder, my thoughts might change. But in 3 rounds, I think this goes the distance and Whittaker outpoints him.
Yeah, plus 190. The odds are unbelievable on that one. Okay, my favorite bet for the prelim fights. I like Alonzo and Menifield going off at even money in a rematch versus Jimmy Crute. Of course, this is a rematch from UFC 284. That fight ended up going to a draw. So you dig into the numbers for that fight. And yes, Crute landed 6 takedowns in that matchup, but I think he got severely outclassed on the feet in that one. And he had a lot working in his favor for that fight. A lot of intangibles, he had the home octagon advantage fighting in Australia. He was fighting a man almost 10 years older than he was. He was coming off a nice long layoff, yet he got rocked and dropped multiple times. He allowed Menifield to connect on 67% of significant strike attempts. Not good defense at all by Crute. And if it wasn't for a point deduction in the third round of that fight when Menifield grabbed the fence, this fight wouldn't even be happening because Menifield would have won the decision. So quite simply, Crute, I don't think he's a very good defensive fighter. And when you see the competition rise a little bit for him, he doesn't perform very well. So Menifield going off at even money, I absolutely love that bet. Okay, our last bet for UFC 290 here. Ro, bring it home for us. What are we looking at?
I'm looking at Jalin Turner against Dan Hangman Hooker. Should be a really fun fight. I love both these guys. I love how they compete. Turner opened at about minus 188. He's sitting at about minus 250 right now. Coming off a close split decision loss to Mateusz Gamrot, he definitely had the edge standing up, but Gamer was able to kind of grind out a victory with his grappling, with his wrestling, and he has struggled against guys with strong offensive wrestling, like Gamrot, like Matt Frivola a few years ago. But Hooker doesn't really have those wrestling credentials to kind of lean on that aspect of his game. Hooker is fresh off a knockout win again. He's coming off that win against Claudio Puelles. I don't really rate Puelles. I didn't rate him before that fight. I certainly don't rate him afterwards. Puelles was way apart in terms of striking ability. He was just kind of sliding around on the mat with his butt on the ground, trying to get Hooker to engage with him on the mat. But in terms of striking, he was just worlds apart. I think, that was a really easy matchup for Hooker. And, I think Hooker's kind of in the downswing of his career. This is a guy that, he had that war with Dustin Poirier a few years ago. Fantastic battle. If you guys haven't watched it, I suggest you go back, watch that on YouTube. Terrific tilt. But I think that took years off his career. He's never really looked the same since. 3 of his next 4 fights he loses. And of course, that's going to happen. You're facing, the Michael Chandlers, Islam Makhachevs, Arnold Allens. Those are top tier fighters. But it's not just that he lost. He was getting just put out. He got finished in the early part of the first round in all of those fights. He really just kind of looks that he's at that stage right now where, he can't really go up against someone with a ton of finishing ability. And Turner certainly has finishing ability. He's a guy with a lot of power. He has a lot of those straight shots, those uppercuts, those knees down the middle. And he's also more than capable of, hurting a guy, taking him to the mat, and then submitting him on the ground as well. So I like Turner to get the win here against a guy that I think is kind of on the downswing of his career. And you can get Turner right now to win inside the distance. It's at minus 145 at Bet365.
It should be an absolute burner for sure. Okay, Ro, before we get going, anything else on your radar that you want to share with the viewers?
Yeah, for the most part, I mean, we're going to be looking at, the entire card when we give you our best picks. And it just so happens that most of our picks are on the top half of this card. But moving forward, I think, there's going to be some picks moving further down. Just depends on kind of what's available. And, of course, Bo Nickel, Jack Della Maddalena, those are guys that are, really interesting prospects, a lot of interest on them, but there's just no betting value right now. There wasn't any betting value with their previous opponents. And now they are taking on guys making their debut on short notice. You're seeing Jack Della Maddalena at minus 1,000. You're seeing Nickel at about minus 2,400. So even if you're betting Nickel to win in the first round, you're laying a ton of chalk. So no real value there, but hopefully moving forward, we can see those guys in some better matchups and we can put our money on those guys.
Yeah, be careful with those parlays. How often do we see it? You're throwing in a minus 1,000 fighter into a parlay, and I don't know where they get finished. It happens all the time. So be very, very careful with that. Okay, that does it for our pound for pound picks, UFC 290 edition. We will be right back with you next week. So make sure you check that out. Also, make sure you like this video. Make sure you are subscribed to the Covers YouTube channel. Lots of great content here, and keep it locked on covers.com for all your UFC betting needs. We'll see you next time. Yeah.